live in a twilight world. Today's topic, the human target. Just before we get into it, for people that don't know, this illustration is from the book Magic, Stage Illusions and Scientific Diversions, including trick photography, compiled and edited by Albert A. Hopkins. This book was put together in the year 1897. So it's late Victorian era book about special effects, stage magic, and so on. So we're going to specifically look at the human target today, and then we'll, compare it, draw a parallel with what's going on currently with World Stage Theatre and World War 33. I mean, the picture is pretty self-explanatory. You got the knife thrower here. The person here, member of the audience or assistant, I don't really know. They stand on a board, in a T shape with their arms out. Then the knife thrower throws knives at him, just barely missing him, right? And to the audience, this looks like he's throwing knives very accurately and that this person is in extreme danger. But actually, if we look closer here, the knives are actually popping out from the board. The knife thrower or the juggler is not actually throwing the knives. He's creating the illusion he's throwing the knives. Very clever, right? So you got to think like the audience is probably going to be, 10 meters away, 10 yards away. The stage is probably going to be not so brightly lit on purpose. So to a human eye, it's going to look like the knife thrower is actually throwing knives when they are not. This person is not in danger. Of course, this person here, whether it's the assistant or a member of the audience, whatever, he's been told where to put his hands and his head, right? It's marked out already on the board, so as that when the knife pops out, it pops out correctly, I'll read this quickly. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll just read this little paragraph here. The first paragraph, the human target. The Japanese jugglers, as well known, are possessed of very extraordinary skill. A few years ago, 2 of them performed the following feat, which required a wonderful dexterity. One of them stood with arms extended in front of a thick board placed vertically, and the other, armed with a number of wide-bladed knives, stationed himself at a distance of about 6 yards from the board, and from thence threw the knives with a sure hand and struck one of them in the board just above the head of the target. 2 of them very close to the right and left of the neck, the others around the arms. In a word, he outlined the form of his companion with the knives stuck very deeply into the board. This performance met with extraordinary success, and then an effort was at once made to reproduce it, but as such, dexterity is not possessed by everybody, and as, in addition, the operation is dangerous. The following substitute was devised by M. Voisin for the use of the magician, or prestidigitateur. I struggle with this word here. I guess I'm going to have to read this, aren't I? Because that first part wouldn't make sense without this. The board that is employed in this case, instead of being, as in the genuine performance, a simple one, is a piece of cabinet work containing an ingenious mechanism. The place which the human target will occupy on this board is carefully marked, and the knives that are to be struck into a board in succession around such place are contained in the cabinet work, which, at first sight and at short distance, seems to be absolutely without preparation. Each of these knives is fixed by its point upon a pivot. In addition, it is controlled by a spring and is concealed within the board by a very finely adjusted double-valved window, which, at a proper moment, opens and allows it to appear and then close. The spring causes the knife to fall or rise according to the place that the latter is to occupy. Number 2 of the engraving shows the window opening to allow the fall of the knife, which will appear as if stuck into the board just above the instep. In each of the valves, the angle that meets each other are cut slopingly, either at the top or bottom, according as the knife is to fall or rise, in order to make space for the blade when the valves are closed. Before the exit of the knife, the incision is closed with modelling wax the colour of the wood. In our engraving, the incision is at the bottom. So there's the engraving. And pretty self-explanatory, right? These are not real knives being thrown across the room, putting this person in danger. Yeah, the knives are already in the board. Yeah, it's already pre-planned. As long as this assistant here or sidekick or member of the audience stays within the lines that are drawn, he's going to be safe. He's going to be fine. So how does this now relate to World War 33, illusion warfare, what's currently going on in regards to world stage theatre? So I would say, this knife throwing trick would be a good metaphor for the strategic bombing that seems to be happening throughout every war, but specifically the Ukraine war, the Israel October 7th theatricality, and the current stuff that's going on right now in the Middle East, yeah? You know, you'll notice that it's always things like oil refineries, or it will be a missile will land in a military base, but it always happens to land like right in that big stretch of empty field that's within the military base. It never hits the control tower. It never hits the armory. It's always very, in my opinion, very precisely hitting in a place that's very safe. Yeah. So if you imagine this lady being like a city, like Kiev, for example, or Odessa, or Tehran, or Tel Aviv, yeah? The bombs are not really landing where the people are. They're landing just outside, in buildings that are designated to be demolished anyway, because they're old, right? Like right now in the Middle East, yeah? The airports that are being hit in the GCC countries are all the airports that are like 50 years old, that are due to be torn down anyway, which is very convenient, isn't it? Again, things like oil refineries. A big thing in the Ukraine war, especially at the beginning, was the amount of oil refineries that were being struck. Now, okay, they're going to give you the answer, well, we're deliberately striking the oil refineries to disrupt the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. And it's like, yeah, that will do that, of course. And that will make the war seem very real for people, won't it? It will make the war appear very real because they're going to have blackouts, energy costs are going to rise, power cuts. But most importantly, especially with oil refineries, because there's oil in there, oil is going to burn very bright, and it's going to make a lot of smoke, which would be the equivalent of this knife being six inches away from this lady's head, right? So if you imagine like the people in Lviv, right? If I'm in the beginning of the Ukraine war, a big oil refinery was struck in Lviv, which is Western Ukraine, which is nowhere near the Donbass. And this oil refinery wasn't in Lviv, it was just outside of Lviv. But everyone in Lviv, looking out the window, walking in the street, would see in the distance this huge tower of smoke. And of course, all the fire engines parking up around it. Now, that oil refinery in Lviv, good possibility that's a false flag attack. Either the British Special Forces or NATO deliberately attacked that, so it would cause problems for the humans in that part of the world, in Western Ukraine, which ultimately will, gather sympathetic support for the war. Because those people in Lviv, which is Western Ukraine, they're a very, very long way away from the Donbass region where there's supposedly tanks. So the fact that the oil refinery in Lviv got hit makes the war appear very real for those people living there. So like I said, if you imagine this lady's face is, the populated area of Lviv, and this oil refinery, which is a couple of kilometers out away from it, it's being seen by the people in Lviv. You get what I'm saying here? It could be a false flag attack, or maybe an allowed attack. So maybe there might have been, British Special Forces that laser designated that on behalf of the Russians who maybe sent the missile over. Or yet again, they were British missiles or NATO missiles coming via Poland or within Ukraine. You get what I'm saying? You understand the similarities here between strategic bombing and the knife throwing trick. Here's a picture of supposedly an oil refinery hit somewhere in Ukraine. I don't know where exactly. It's just a picture I pulled off the Google search. Interestingly, I just Google searched Lviv oil refinery strike or hit, and all that's coming up right now on Google at this moment in time is pure propaganda saying about how Ukraine has knocked out like 40% of Russians' energy sources. So it wouldn't surprise me if that whole incident I'm talking about in Lviv was purely fictional and has now been just memory hold, like most of the stuff in Ukraine. Just the same way they memory hold the Battle of Kiev after I exposed it, right? The second I landed in Kiev and started exposing this idea of 157,000 paratroopers, Russian paratroopers, in and around Kiev was pure nonsense, they immediately just memory hold the Battle of Kiev storyline. And they tried to retcon it many times. But anyway, so this might be a purely AI picture, I don't know. But nevertheless, oil refineries seem to be the main target in the Ukraine war and in the Middle East war. And like I said earlier, I'm just repeating myself now, you're going to get given, like the average person will say, because they've watched the news, that's because they're trying to disrupt the energy infrastructure of their enemy. And yes, that does bring the war experience into reality for people in that area. So, yet again, the term, the human target, they're targeting oil refineries, which will affect humanity because our existence right now has been made to be pretty much ultra dependent upon oil. Whether that's crude oil, diesel fuel for vehicles and tractors and military vehicles, petrol for everyday cars, even just the petroleum that's used in like all kinds of like household goods and chemicals and stuff that we use in day-to-day life. So if you fuck with or mess up an oil refinery, the effects are going to hit the humans definitely in that area, but also because it's a globalized world, it's going to affect countries next door, isn't it? So right now, the war in the Middle East, it's massively affecting, or it's going to affect Europe. It's going to affect people like Australia, Asia, countries that are heavily dependent on the Gulf Arab states' oil and Iranian oil. They're now going to feel the effects. So this is definitely hitting oil refineries, is to affect humanity. So the term human target applies here. But also, the main reason I brought up this picture is, when you think about it, an oil refineries are shut off from the public, just like any power station. There's going to be chain link fences, security cameras, security guards. There's not going to be a lot of people there other than the workers that are working there. Do you know what I'm saying? So population-wise, that oil, let's say that, for example, this oil refinery here, be it real or fictional, is not going to have that many people there. I mean, let's say like an average size oil refinery located in Ukraine. How many workers are going to be there on an average day, on a Monday morning? 100 workers? 200 workers? So as long as they're evacuated, those 200 workers, and the evacuation process will be very good in an oil refinery because it's an oil refinery, where it'll be health and safety mad, and you will have to do training on how to evacuate if there's an incident. It's going to be very, very easy to get those 100 workers out quickly before the bomb hits it, or the missile, or the drone, or whatever. So that's the first thing. It's going to have a low population compared to, say, dropping a missile or drone, bomb, whatever, inside the city itself, where you're going to have a lot of casualties. A lot of innocent people are going to die. And people, inside of a city, they're not trained in how to evacuate where they live as quickly as people who work in an oil refinery will be trained on how to get out and evacuate and get all their colleagues out very, very quickly. So the oil refinery is an ideal target. Also, there's the whole theatricality side of this. Yeah? Because it's an oil refinery, it's going to create a lot of smoke. It's going to create smoke that can be seen far and wide. Probably people like, I'm going to guess, the average human can see, they say 3 miles, right? If you're standing at sea level, you can probably see about 3 miles with the naked eye. If you're standing slightly higher up, like on a mountain or a hill, you can obviously see further, can't you? Because of angles. On a clear day with like no atmospheric disturbance, I'm pretty sure you can see a fire, like a regular kind of campfire, about 10 kilometers away with the naked eye. So if you can see a campfire about 10 kilometers away with the naked eye, an oil refinery on fire is going to be, I don't know, 1,000 times bigger than a campfire. The point is, you're going to see it all around. Pretty much, I'm going to assume, for example, in Lviv, when the oil refinery was hit, everyone in Western Ukraine probably could have seen this huge tower of smoke going up into the sky. And at night time, the fire itself. Plus all the fire engines with their blue flashing lights. You get what I'm saying here? So from a theatricality point of view, it's the ideal target. Because it's going to create so much smoke. Obviously, everyone has been conditioned now to do the whole Truman Show of filming everything on their smartphone. So they're all going to be standing down here filming this, posting it to social media. Once again, they're going to involve themselves. These humans are now going to involve themselves in the illusion. So once again, although it's hitting an oil refinery, the target is the human. Not to be blown up by this bomb, but to experience this bomb and then film it and be a part of it. So yeah, just like, you know, a lamp, an oil lamp, has been around for a long time. It burns bright. It burns for a long time. That's another thing. Oil, because it's an oil refinery, is going to burn for a long, long time. This could be burning for weeks before they finally, you know, before the local fire brigade or national fire brigade, whatever, finally put out this fire. So this tower of smoke is going to go on for weeks. So, in my opinion, definitely a good metaphor of this right here, the human target. So just like this person here represents a major city, and where the knives are popping up is going to be oil refineries, empty military bases, old airports, derelict buildings, and so on, isn't it? And of course, like I said, I've kind of already spoken about this, but I think it's pretty safe to say that when it comes to this kind of bombing, both sides are working together. Like, either they're bombing their own oil refineries, they're bombing their own bases, or they're providing the intelligence to the enemy. Now, when I talk about that, I'm talking about at the highest levels, yeah? So I'm not talking about the whole Ukrainian army. I'm not talking about the whole Iranian army. I'm not talking about the whole US army, yeah? There will be SBOs, stay-behind organizations, already set up in every country by the City of London, yeah? So these clandestine agents that are specialize in espionage and sabotage, they will be providing the coordinates, the intelligence, they might even be literally holding a laser designator out of the back of a van so that it goes up to a drone, which then works with the enemy missiles, or they're just simply doing their own missile strikes. Don't forget, yeah, that the Ukrainians have got, like, way before the war started, something like 22,000 British troops stationed there. Yeah, and like days before the war started, I think it was something like 600 or 800 British commandos turned up to Ukraine. Now, in case people are sleeping or not paying attention, the phantom menace that you're all looking for, the one that's behind all of these terrorist attacks, yeah, the hidden hand, is the British Empire. The British Empire is not dead. The British Empire is just pretending to be dead. Yeah? The greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince people he doesn't exist. The greatest trick the British Empire played was convincing the world it no longer exists. And because people don't believe that the British Empire exists, they are like a ghost running around in the shadows doing all this stuff, especially when it comes to war. Yeah? They're always around. So, just like this knife pops up from the board here, you've essentially got elements within Ukraine blowing up Ukrainian oil refineries. You've got elements in Iran blowing up their own oil refineries. It's only on the news that they make out it was done by the Russians. They make out the knife was flying through the air via the Russians or via the Americans or via the Israelis. You get what I'm saying? Let me just have a swig of my coffee. So, just to recap, yeah, the human target. Here's the human who's supposedly the target, but the knives are not actually hitting the human. They are deceptively landing besides this human here. Yeah, this is a metaphor for the strategic bombing that is going on in World War 33. I'm pretty sure in World War II as well. Every war, if you're asking me. But, I don't like to push it too far because I know a lot of people will just roll their eyes and tune out. So I try and be as conservative with this as I can, yeah? So just like there's a human here, imagine this is a city. The missile or the drone or the bomb is not landing in a city where there are millions of people. It's landing just outside of the city. For example, an oil refinery where only about 100 people work, and it's very easily evacuated because they rehearse evacuations week in, week out because it's an oil refinery. And because it's an oil refinery that provides energy, it's going to affect humans, in that region, yeah? It's also going to be very theatrical because the amount of smoke, yeah, it's an oil refinery. So the amount of fire and smoke that is going to appear, that people are going to film for social media, is going to be very impactful. So once again, it's actually a lot more theatrical than actually dropping bombs on a load of civilians where you'd actually kill a lot of people. This is more theatrical. This has more of an impact. It affects humanity more than actually dropping bombs on a city centre during rush hour. Another example of the knife landing next to the human is all of these US military bases across the Gulf. They were all evacuated, weren't they? Before the war started, all of these US military bases were evacuated. The missiles, the drones, whatever, even just barrels of explosives were put inside and, blowing up the military base once again. Yeah? Just like the knife, and these military bases, they're not going to be inside the middle of a major city, are they? They're going to be in the middle of nowhere. But there's a good chance that from a highly populated place, either a city, a town, or a village, you could look out into the distance and perhaps see the smoke coming up like so. Yeah? Here's the city. Here's where the missile strikes. Just close enough so you can see it, and it becomes a very real experience for the people living there. Another good example of this would be like in Ukraine, all across the Donbass region are these empty villages, empty towns like Bakhmut, Avdiivka. Towns that once, when they were a part of the Soviet Union, yeah, they were full up. But once the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine had around, I think, 22 million people leave. So you've got 22 million occupants that are now not there. The buildings are there, but the people are not there. That's a lot of buildings. Yeah, that's a lot of commie blocks, village farms, farmhouses, railway houses, just an abundance of empty, derelict buildings where you can just drop bombs willy-nilly and it doesn't really affect anyone. I think Bakhmut, which was for a long time in the Ukraine war, the center point, had a population, Bakhmut was 10% occupied, meaning 90% unoccupied. So of all the buildings that were in Bakhmut, only 10% were occupied. Very easily to evacuate them, then the bombs are dropping. Once again, the next city away from Bakhmut is going to look out the window and see a lot of smoke and the occasional explosions now and again happening in Bakhmut. The same way this lady here is seeing a knife arrive 3 inches away from her face. But as we discussed in the beginning of the video, these knives are not actually flying through the air, they're actually popping up from the board behind. So there's a good, in my opinion, you don't have to follow me on this one or believe me on this one, I strongly suspect these bombings are coming from within inside. It's an inside job, basically. Once you understand at the top of the Ukrainian military, yeah, those people are working with the top people of the Russian military. They're all agents of the City of London, which ultimately works for the Double Cross. They're all working together, yeah? These vampires at the top are working together with the vampires at the top of the enemy, yeah? It's only on world stage theatre that they pretend to be, you know, at each other's throats and willing to kill each other. Behind closed doors, behind the curtains, they're gay lovers, yeah? And it's their job to keep humanity in this kind of low vibration, fear-based frequency so they can remain where they are. So I don't know, I think this is a good metaphor for the strategic bombing, the human target. I'm going to wrap this video up now because I feel like I've been talking a lot of bollocks now for over half an hour at least. Hopefully you kind of get what I'm saying. If you don't, well, I don't know. Is what it is. We live in a twilight world. There are no friends at dusk.